You're listening to She Speaks, a Let Her Speak podcast that celebrates women's fearlessness, resiliency, and readiness to change the world.
Hi, I'm Saray Taylor-Roman, and I am a master portrait photographer. But most importantly, at the moment, I am a photographer's business coach. And the word that I will use to describe the last 2 years will be opportunity.
Okay. Is that good? Good? Okay. So opportunity.
Yes.
Is what you would use to describe. So I know the last time we talked, your life has looked completely different now in what you're doing. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the journey that you've been on since, 2020, 2021?
For sure. So from 2015 up to 2021, I was strictly a portrait photographer. And I had been coaching on the side, doing one-on-one with some photographers around the US, but it was not my main source of income, and it wasn't something that I advertised on my website or anywhere else. I didn't have anything. People just reached out to me because they had heard me about on different podcasts or, within the community where I had spoken. So they kind of knew that I was doing well, and they wanted to see if I could show them how they could do the same. So I did it very much on the side. And then at the end of 2021, my mentor, Bryce, who is big in the industry, she said, Saray, what do you think the next step for you is? And I was like, I don't know, keep making my business better, right? And she's like, I think you're ready for the next step, which is about, stepping into the industry as a leader. People look up to you, and you need to be purposeful about it if that's what you want to do. And I said, well, I don't know if that's what I want to do. But that's why the word is opportunity, because the opportunity presented itself. And even though I didn't know exactly what that would mean, I stepped into it. And so she said, maybe you want to submit your name and some proposals to different conferences for next year and see what they say. So I did that. I actually got to speak in February of this year, or in March. It was the end of February, beginning of March, in the largest photography conference worldwide, which is called WPPI. That stands for Wedding and Portrait Photographers International. And that was crazy. It was a huge roller coaster of emotions because I was so, excited, but at the same time I was so nervous to be speaking in front of such a large crowd. And so I had begun, when I knew that I was going to be speaking there a few months before, I was writing, my presentation, what am I going to be sharing about? And I just kept tossing them. Just nothing made sense. And at the time, my mentor began a coaching program for people who want to get into coaching and consulting. And so I was like, can I be a part of it? And she's like, yes, sign up for it. So I did. And I learned how to, from there, put everything that I had been through in the last 5-7 years, into content. Because she said, it's not about teaching something you don't know or just telling. It's about showing where you've been and telling your story. Because nobody can deny that. That's where you're an expert at, is in the things that you have done. And so the doors started opening, and I had now the materials that I needed, the skill set, I had been developing, working with her to create what I was going to be sharing about. And so that's how it started. It's crazy that just from January to now, which is the beginning of May, when we're doing this, I've launched my coaching program in a group setting. And it's been amazing. The results that people are getting just in the first 2 weeks, are speaking for themselves. And that's what gets me really excited. I want to free people financially, but also in time management, because it's two things that I struggle with when I built my business. And now at a point where I don't have to struggle with that anymore. And I want other people to see that it's possible, not just to have a thriving business, but that you can also have a thriving life with balance.
So that's amazing. So you went from the very end of 2021, I'm going to be a portrait photographer. That's what I do, and that's what I'm going to continue to do, to a few months later, you've now launched a program. You've spoken at one of the largest conferences for your industry. How did you internally switch that and flip that in your brain, that I am somebody who can be a leader? Because I know it takes a lot more than somebody telling you it. You have to believe it internally yourself.
Yes.
So how did that process play out?
And I think that also happened with what I experienced at the beginning of my portrait career. Because when I started as a portrait photographer, I didn't have the training, that most, I guess, portrait photographers have. I didn't go to school for photography. I went to school for teaching. I was a high school Spanish teacher up to June of 2015. And I was still in photography, was my side hustle, right? And so at the time, I felt so much that imposter syndrome, right? Who am I to have these prices, to think of myself as an artist or as a photographer when I don't have any credentials in that field under my name? And so the same exact thought process came, and it's like, you're not a coach. You just had a business for 7 years. You've just, and all of the negative talk just came back. And then I remember that my coach said, my own mentor, she said, Saray, those things never go away. They'll always come back when you're ready to level up, but you'll recognize them sooner and you'll know what to do. Because you realize that it's just negative talk. That is not necessarily the truth. It's not reality. You can turn it into reality, but it doesn't have to be a reality. And so I said, okay, so how do you get rid of imposter syndrome? You just do the work. You just take action. And so I decided to just do the work, whether I felt like I was ready or not. I said, I'm in a process of learning. And I just, when I was a teacher and I taught Spanish in high school, Spanish is my native language. I went to school through college for 3 years, even in Mexico, from kindergarten all the way to that. So I knew my language well. I know the history, the culture, all of that stuff. And yet there were some questions that my kids had that were like, why is this way? And I knew that was the rule, but I don't necessarily knew the reasoning behind it. And I was never afraid to say, you know what, I have no idea, but I'll let you know tomorrow. Right? And so I was like, you can just do the same with your coaching. There's going to be questions that are going to come up that maybe you have not been through yet, that you have not experienced, that none of your one-on-one mentees have experienced yet. But you can say, you know what, let's figure it out together. And I said, you know what, okay, I can do that. I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to be an expert in everything. I just have to share my story. I have to tell them, this is what I've done. These are the steps I've taken. This is how I have made my processes and systems better. And you can do the same if you just do, steps 1 through 10.
I think that is such an important thing that I feel like we have to be reminded and learn constantly, is that our perception of what an expert is versus the reality of who an expert is are completely different. An expert isn't somebody who has all the answers. A truly intelligent expert level type of person is one who knows the answers that they don't know but they at least know where to go and find those solutions and those answers to give. And I have a feeling too that your background in teaching is probably a big part of what's fueling this new iteration of what you're working on now. So do you feel that a lot of the things that you learned when you were a teacher are all coming back and you're applying a lot of that into your coaching program?
Absolutely. And, at the time, I think there were so many things that I was like, goals, measurable goals, tangible or whatever. And I was like, I have to write all these things and the objectives for each course. And, it was like, okay, I know that, that's the purpose of it. But now I can see, I'm like, okay, I want to make sure that the people that come through my coaching program, they know what to expect they know what results to expect because that's going to get them excited. So I started working backwards and say, okay, this is what they want to achieve. This is where they are. And so we do kind of like a audit to their business and say, okay, so let's see where you are first. Let's fix all of those foundational problems if you have any. And once that's done, then we can start bringing clients in. Because that's what I teach. I teach marketing, and I teach lead generation, and I teach converting those leads into clients and then keeping them in such a way that they will always be generating clients for you, because that's how I build my business. And so that's what I teach. Most people are teaching, in the industry right now, it's like maybe social media ads as a way to get in clients, or they say, well, you just need to do this or that. There's no specifics. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's what I think sets me apart. Having that background in teaching, I can break it down into goals, things that can be measurable. You've probably heard of SMART goals, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that it's things that they can just say, not just, oh, I feel better. Oh, I think I can do it. But they actually get the job done and they get to experience results.
So you mentioned mm-hmm. looking at the foundation first and ensuring that that's a stable foundation. So what are some of the key things that you look for in a stable foundation? So
the first thing that we look at is make sure that they have a process in place from the moment they get an inquiry all the way to that they see the person. Like in our case, it's how do you prep that client to have the experience with you. They have the actual photo shoot, what happens to the images afterwards, how do you deliver that? And then, how do you give that to the client and you get a testimonial or a referral from them, right? And then how you continue that relationship throughout the next months or years, so they come back or they send you somebody else. So they have to have a process in place, first of all. Because one of the main things that gets you referrals is that you have a consistent process with every client. If to one client you do something, but then to the next one you do something different, then nobody's going to know what they're going to get with you. Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that it's the same experience for everybody. The second thing that we look at is pricing. One of the, you already know is a lot of businesses fail because they don't price themselves right. A lot of it comes from like that imposter syndrome. Who am I to charge this? Right? And so we look at pricing, not just based on what the market can bear, but based on their personal lifestyle, right? So what are your bills every month? Not just for the business, but personal. If this is your side hustle now, but you want to replace it as your main job, right? And quit that other job that you have, how much money do you need to bring in? And then realistically, how many hours can you work? So then we do the math there backwards, from a year into a month, into a week, and say, this is how many clients you can see at this average. And from that average, we create a pricing menu that is going to be sustainable in the long run.
And I know you have, and for anybody listening, if you have never heard Saray talk about pricing, you need to find. So there's a few podcasts that I know that you've talked about pricing yes. on, but also that is one of the main things that I love having Saray come and talk to some of my students about that I teach entrepreneurship to is how do you price yourself? Because I think you're absolutely right. Imposter syndrome, it rears its ugly head very much when you're having to price yourself. And the same thing happens in, negotiations. Mm-hmm. If you're in corporate or in healthcare or in academics, I mean, it rears its head in every place of how do I value myself? Mm-hmm. And I know one thing that you talk about too is that the perception of value and quality mm-hmm. are very much tied to pricing. Mm-hmm. And so when you price yourself low, then the perceived value and quality of the work is also perceived to be low.
Yeah.
Right. So are there certain types of conversations when it comes to pricing that you find yourself needing to have with the people that you're coaching on a pretty regular basis?
So one of the things is self-value. I mean, it's really attached to the pricing that we put, when we first start. But I tell them math doesn't lie. And so if you do the math and you set your little emotions apart for a little bit, just so that you can get the math done and you see that huge number you need to come up with your business, and then you realize, this is what I need to make. And then, for example, I use Square to collect payments from clients. And one of the things that I've taught my mentees, because Square just came up with this year, and I used to have it in different bank accounts. If you have not read that book,
Profit First?
Profit First. You know, I highly recommend it. It changed entirely how I did my business. And so I do that, but now I can do it through Square. They can take up to 60% of all my earnings from every client that comes in, and I can allocate it directly, and they gave me 5% APR. I'm like, yay, it's a win-win for everybody. So I teach them also, I'm like, out of $1,000, you don't get to spend $1,000. Depending on which bracket you are, you're going to give a percentage, you know, to Uncle Sam. You're going to have to, you know, if you're selling a product, about 10% of that you're already collecting from clients goes to sales tax. You need to have a rainy day fund. I'm like, you're going to be paying for, you know, new equipment eventually. So make a percentage that goes toward that, a percentage that goes toward, you know, so you start putting all those things apart, and then you end up with like 30% that is actually yours, that you can do whatever you want with that. So, you know, a lot of times when they see the big price, they're like, oh, I'm like, you're not getting that. You're getting 30% of that. That's your pay. And so they start seeing that, oh, okay, so if I only charge $200, right? I only make whatever. Like, I can do the math, $60 for 20 hours worth of work.
Right, exactly.
And so, you know, like, you know, I think you'll be better off working at an hourly place at Starbucks or somewhere.
Right, it's lower than minimum wage. Yeah.
Yes. So you need to take into consideration all of those things. But yeah, I feel that pricing is one of the things that we really place an emphasis on. But self-value, and I say, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. What came first? And I tell my story, and I said, I didn't believe that my pricing, that anybody was going to pay it, first of all. Second of all, I didn't believe I was worthy of receiving that amount. And guess what? I didn't change it. I said, if this is going to work, this is how it's going to work. And if nobody gets, I guess that's not what I was meant to do. But at the time, I didn't know marketing either, right? And so, but once I started doing that and giving the value, I myself became that person who was that valuable because my clients valued it, right? And so it's like what comes first. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have that self-value yet, but you can grow into it if you do the math and if you have pricing set up right. And another thing that also helped me, I said, we're going to work with them on their coaching group program, is getting testimonials from clients. You know, one of the things that helped me really believed in the value of what I provided was hearing from them and seeing how transformative and how powerful the images that I had created for them were and how they saw themselves in a different light after them. And then I realized that what I was doing, even if I had put a price to it, they really were priceless. Right? And so I wanted to make sure that I gave that to them. So that's one of the things that I tell people. It's like, if the inner value is not there yet, still do the work. The more steps you take, the value will come through. And then get testimonials from your clients. Because when you hear how valuable it is for them, you realize that what you are offering, it really has a value that you can't put a price to it. But you put one just because you need to make that money to cover all your expenses and the lifestyle that you live.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a huge amount of validation in asking for those testimonials. I mean, I know when you were sharing your story when we interviewed you last, and we really dug more into why did you choose this path and why did you choose to leave being a teacher, and the realization that you had that you never wanted to be in front of the camera and you never wanted a woman or anybody to ever feel that they were not worthy of having these beautiful portraits done of them. And you started realizing the value, and then you started stepping in front of the camera now more too, and you have these beautiful photos of you that have been taken. So how has that feeling of that heart that you had in doing portraits, how has that transitioned into what you're doing now with coaching?
And I feel it's the same thing. You know, I'm a first generation immigrant. I am the first in my family to have a business. Actually, you know, being an immigrant, also my parents placed a lot of emphasis on education. So I have a master's degree. My sister has a postdoctorate degree. And actually, it's funny because what I've been doing lately inspired her to last year began taking makeup lessons because that's what she wanted to do all her life. And now she started her makeup business.
Wow.
So, it's that. It's one of the things that my coach said just last week when I was telling her how the coaching program was going and how people were so excited about it. She said, I cannot wait to see how many more people you free, how many more Latino women you free. Because I was born in Mexico. It's a very chauvinistic culture. I remember as a kid when my dad would take us to conferences and stuff with him, and other guys will be like, oh, so when are you getting a boy? Why don't you have a boy? And my dad will be like, well, I have two girls and they're just like any boy or better, right? But it was not the culture that I grew up in. Mm-hmm. And the fact that I had somebody that saw things differently, I'm so thankful for that, for my dad. But she says, it's like the people that are connecting with you, even at the conference in WPP I was sharing my story. All the people that came afterwards to say, something, how that talk had talked to them and touched them, they were all immigrants from around the world. And it was amazing to see that they could see somebody that had broken through the generational curses, mm-hmm. Or those cultural boundaries that we were placed in, and that it was possible to step out of that and become who you wanted to be. So I feel that it's the same thing. Now, the fact that I was able to do it, I feel that everybody else can do it. If I could do it, anyone can do it.
And it's just so important too. You always hear representation matters, mm-hmm. and it's so true. You need to see someone who has that shared experience with you that is unique to a specific group, and being a first generation immigrant absolutely is a shared experience that I know personally. I have no idea what that's like. I'm several generations removed mm-hmm. from the first of my mm-hmm. family to come here. And I came from a background that was very, pro-female empowerment. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you go and do whatever you want to do. Don't let, my dad was like, don't let me determine what you're going to do. You just go and do your thing. But to come from a background that is not embraced in the culture, that different, especially women, but I know all people grow up in, I think it's such an incredible thing that you would think that we would see more often, but we don't. So to have someone like you that sits in front of these people that are just feeling like their life and the culture that they come from, it's predetermined what they should be doing. And to see someone that said, you know what, I chose a different path for myself and I am doing fantastic, I think is just an amazing thing that you wish that you saw more often. So what, from a standpoint of how this has impacted, because you've talked about your family and you talked about your sister is now becoming a makeup artist. So are you going to be working with each other on some shoots every so often?
So she lives in San Diego,
okay,
California, so it's kind of far away.
Yeah.
But right now, she actually, when I told her about my coaching program, she said, can I join it? She's like, I know I'm not a photographer, but I'd love to join it. She's like, because she reached out to me last year when she wanted to do all of this, right? And leave. She was teaching at the University of San Diego. She's been published several times. And she's like, I don't know if this is what I should be doing. I was like, what does your heart tell you? At the end of the day, that's what matters. And so, and for as long as I can remember, she always did her makeup. She did all of her friends' hair and makeup. Like, that was her thing. And I was like, that's who you are. That's what you love doing. Why not? Right? So she started her class. And then I said, okay, from what I've learned from mine, I want you to do a boutique business style. It's going to provide you the most time freedom, but also the most financial freedom. And so I coach her on branding. I coach her on pricing. I coach her on everything. And she actually did it, which I was surprised. I'm like, if you're listening, sorry, Betsy. I'm like, she's my younger sister. Well, there's only two of us. But most of the time when she asked me for advice, she will do the opposite. And so I was like, whatever. But, she actually did all of it. And, she told me 2 weeks ago, she had booked her first $5,000 wedding for hair and makeup
That's
in San Diego.
amazing.
So, she was just like, I can, and I was like, and it's because of what you told me. So she's like, I want to be part of your coaching program. And I was like, well, I need an admin. If you want to be the admin, I won't charge you. And so she's like, yeah, sure. So, but a lot of the things that I'm talking about, they transfer to different things. And I like that I'm able to influence my sister in that regard with my daughter, and ultimately that's the thing. I was a very self-conscious person. I was very timid. I'm still an introvert person. I can extrovert because I've learned how to do it. But I still need to guard myself to not overdo it, because then I get depleted and I'm exhausted. And so with my daughter, I want her also to see, that it's possible to go after her dreams and do whatever she wants to do. With my dad, at least I had the support from him to do that, even if culturally I didn't have it and I was going against the current. But now she's raised in an entirely different place. It's not just that, yeah, you can do it. It's what's expected, kind of, and I don't want her to, like, she has shown interest in photography. She's shown interest in creating her own YouTube videos and stuff. She's 9. I don't know what she wants to do, and I don't get to determine that. I want her to explore all these different things and then find that one thing that makes her heart sing.
Yeah, and it's very common that we don't figure that out until we're much later in life. I mean, to try to figure out what am I going to be when I'm 18 years old, it's just like, I think the majority of us are not where we thought we were going to be when we were 18.
Sure. I mean, even last year, I had no idea that I would be coaching now.
Right.
So, yes.
Exactly. And you talked about the fact that there's a lot of transferable skills that you're teaching, but the other thing though with like talking about your sister is I could definitely see people in her situation that have put in so many years into this one track that they were on. Getting a PhD is no easy feat in itself. And to go down that road, I think I could see a lot of people feeling like, well, I've invested so much time into this for me to just leave it behind and transition to something else, even though they know that it would make them happy and it would bring them joy. What have you had to have those types of conversations with her, with other people that you work with?
Well, and to me, yes, I have had it. Actually, a lot of the people that reach out to me right now are on a current job. They hold a current 9-to-5, Monday through Friday job that they would love to get out of. And I was there. I was burnt out. I was depressed when I left my teaching job, not because of the kids. The kids were amazing. That was my favorite part. It was everything else. And so, I feel that they relate to that part of my story. And that's the same thing that I think my sister just needed that permission, because when I started, my mom, for example, and my dad and my mother-in-law, out of the goodness of their heart, they wanted to protect me and say, you have a great job, you have amazing benefits, you have paid vacation, lots of vacation time. If really if you really like photography, just do it on the side whenever, you don't have to leave that job. And my sister was having the same conversations with my parents, right? And I said, look, they said the same thing to me. And I know that if I had stayed, I don't know where I would be. It was a dark place that I was already, and it could have gotten much darker. I said, and I don't know exactly where you are. I said, but it could be so much better if you do what you want to do. It's definitely scary. And I'm like, and one of the things that I recommend people, I'm like, keep that job until you have a consistent stream of clients. Actually, when I started photography, I was started in 2013, creating my portfolio. 2014, at the end of 2014, I had my first client. January 2015, I opened for business officially. And then I quit my teaching job on June 1st of 2015. The plan was to actually quit on June 1st of 2020. I had a 5-year plan to ease myself out of teaching. And actually, I had created this plan here at the Knoxville Entrepreneurial Center with some of the teachers there. When they say, how to create a business plan and all of that, I created it. I was like, okay, I feel that, it's a plan that it's doable. In 5 years, I can get out of teaching. But then it just took over, and I was able to do it in 5 months. So I said, don't be afraid to be doing it on the side. Now you have something else to look forward to. It's sustaining this new dream of yours. But sometimes if you quit too soon, and then the funds aren't there, you're going to get very discouraged. You're going to get really scared. You're going to start working out of a place of need and scarcity instead of abundance. And so it's not going to be good for you or your business. So I always say, keep it up until the point where your business can stand on its feet. Thinking of a baby. You can't expect a business to go from, newborn to adult in one day, right? That's why there's all the different stages. But maybe when they're not a toddler, but once they start being a kid, and they can make their own breakfast and, and they don't need mom and dad kind of thing. I'm like, that's when your business maybe you can leave the other job because you're a little bit more self-sustainable then.
Now, the one thing that I have heard, I feel on a more regular basis coming out of the pandemic is a lot of entrepreneurs that went into the pandemic and they were entrepreneurs already. They had already started their businesses, even though I know the pandemic created this necessity that a lot of people started their own businesses. But through the pandemic, they were operating in that mindset of, I just need to keep making more money so that I can ensure that everything is sustained. Now that we're coming on the other side of things, they've looked at what they've created and they hate it. And they hate their lives that they've created for themselves and the business. While yes, they're making lots of money and they're making good money, they're completely burned out. They're tired. They didn't create something that was sustainable for them, even though monetarily it was sustainable. So, I mean, what type of advice or thoughts do you have about that?
I'm glad that you asked that because I went through that too, right? So I was burnt out as a teacher. I left that job and then I got burnt out as a portrait photographer because we repeat patterns that we know. That's what we just do over and over again. And actually for me, the pandemic and the lockdown was the silver lining to it was that I actually realized that I didn't to be working, hustling all the time. I got to the point we had very good 6 months previous to when we were closed, and so we were able to continue paying our team even if they were not coming to work. They are the best team I've ever had. Alibeth, who does makeup, Jeremy, who does hair, Brooke now, who's one of my associate photographers, but started as an intern. And so all of these people that are amazing. I want to make sure that I support them in a way and that they keep growing also. And so we were able to pay them. But then I realized, I was like, I felt that because of the imposter syndrome, I was overcompensating. And that I was like, oh, yeah, well, I didn't go to school for this. I didn't have credentials for that. But I'm going to outwork anyone and everyone around me, right? And I'm going to keep breaking my own records every single month because that's who I am and I want to prove myself. And then I was so exhausted. Yes, the money was great, but I didn't even have time to enjoy it. And so, when we were shut down, I remember that first week I slept like 15 hours a day because I was that tired. And then after that, the second week, I slept as much as I could, and I only ate cereal like twice a day, and that's all I did. It was horrible, but my body needed self-care. And then the second week, I watched Tiger King because who didn't, right?
Right.
And I was like, why did I just watch? And then the third week, I was like, okay, I'm rested. I started, cooking again and taking care of my body on the inside as well. And then I realized that all of this creativity came back. And I started creating outfits and headpieces. And I didn't know when I was going to use them, but I was creating them. And it was just amazing. And as soon as we were able to open, I started using all of those in photo shoots. And I got the most awards I've ever gotten from that year, from all the stuff that I created. So I realized that I didn't need to be working that hard, that I didn't need to prove myself to myself or to anyone. And so I redid the math and I said, this is where we need to be comfortable, to be saving, and to take care of our team. And it's about 50% of what we had been doing. So let's scale down. And so I did. And it's been the best thing ever. I am relaxed. I'm rested. I only take events within certain times. Now that I've trained my team, when I started coaching, I said, well, I cannot do the photography as much anymore. So I trained 2 people. One of them is my makeup artist, and the other one was my high school intern last year. So they're both now taking clients for me. And it's good. I'm giving somebody else a job. I'm giving somebody else the opportunity to do something that they really enjoy, they want to explore. And I'm getting extra time to build this new part of my business, but also to take the time to enjoy it.
And I think that is such an amazing story for people to have sink in, is that by doing less, you've actually achieved more. And you've been able to do more, and a lot of it is that out of rest comes creativity. And if you're constantly going, like, you're not going to be able to have the capacity to think about these cool things that really make a lot of, whenever you see a Saray Taylor-Roman photo, it's like, oh, that's a Saray. I know 100% that is a Saray right there, because you have that, there is that specific look, and it's like, and it came, I think a lot of the photos that I've seen, I think came out of that out of the pandemic, when you had all of these creative shoots and everything. Yes. It's like, oh, that is 100% a Saray. There's nobody else that would do that. And that's so incredible to also have that signature too, that people can see. I feel like that's something that people strive for, is that you can look at a photo and know, without even knowing the name, that is that photographer's portrait.
Yes.
So that leads me actually to this question I didn't ask last time, but I've always been curious about, is how did you develop the signature style and look that when somebody looks at it, they know that you were the photographer behind that?
So, and this is one question that gets asked a lot also when I'm working with photographers. First, start by repetition and by imitation. That's just how you start as an artist, unless I guess you're a genius and you just are born with that style, right? But most people, we're going to learn from somebody else. So I learned from my mentor, and I first just tried to recreate that. And at first, my images didn't look anything what I wanted them to look like. I had a vision of what that was. I just didn't know how to create it. And so by mimicking others' techniques and by trying to recreate all of that again in my studio with my own clients, I learned how to master the skills that I needed. Once I mastered the skills, then I said, okay, I know now how to shape light. I know how to move things. I know how to style things. I can now put all of that together and see if I can bring my vision to life. Now, that vision needs to be unique to you. And this is why there's no competition when it comes to artists, because you're just in competition with yourself. You're in a journey, right? Not even in competition, you're in a journey. And so, when you are true to your style and true to your vision, nobody else can do that, only you. So what I've done is take your life experiences and the things that you're attracted to and make something out of it. So when I teach, for example, about style, I tell people, where do you draw inspiration from? I'm from Mexico. I was born on the Gulf Coast. So I'm going to have a lot of movement, a lot of air, a lot of wind, a lot of waves. All that movement in my photographs, because that's where I'm from. There's going to be color, because my favorite place to visit during the summer was my grandfather's garden. And he had this beautiful hibiscus with all these beautiful petals in these different shapes and forms. And you'll see that I'm recreating those shapes with the movement that my clients are creating with the fabric or their hair or their hands. So I'm always attracted to that. In terms of fashion, I love, for example, dark romanticism. For example, Alexander McQueen. He has like very lights and pastels and florals against like dark leather and spikes, spiky things. So I like the juxtaposition of that. So I bring that in. And then I like high fashion, things that, at the moment I couldn't afford because it's a $250,000 dress, but maybe I can hack something like that for my studio, And so I bring all of those elements. I like high fashion photography. And so when I look at, for example, Vogue magazine, I don't look at the editorial per se. I look at the ads. That's where I get the most inspiration. An ad for perfume or an ad for a watch or an ad for a piece of clothing. And I'm trying to see, especially if it's on your iPad, I'm like, I zoom in onto their eye. I'm like, okay, so that's where the light is located. I think it's this far or it's this close. Maybe I can try to do that. But now use my own color palette, which is very pastels and very soft colors, right? And maybe use my own styling. And so I'm taking things from different places. It's funny because I don't follow photographers. My inspiration comes from different places that are not photography. And that's why I tell people, dig deep from your childhood, from the things you enjoy. Where do you gravitate to? My favorite place is the beach. Right? And when I was a kid, I wanted to be an entomologist. And I love finding insects and their carcasses and then bring them home. My mom didn't like that. But then, like dissecting them and I love the shapes. And so you'll see that even with my dancers, sometimes they look like like a butterfly or like a dragonfly or just all these different insect shapes that I create with the fabric. So it's just find whatever makes you happy and then bring all that together.
You make it sound so simple and easy, which like I feel it is and it isn't. It's like it's kind of the same as as somebody asking a question about like what do you most love to do in life, and it's all of a sudden there's too many things that come to mind. And you're like, oh my gosh, how do I even select one thing that I love? But I love that. It is like once you describe it, you can absolutely see that in all of the things that you do. Did you realize that as you were creating, or was it something that it took some reflection back and then you noticed?
It was more an epiphany after the fact.
Okay.
Because I was trying to look on, okay, so what is my style like, right? And so people are like, well, we can definitely see that that's yours. But I didn't necessarily know. And then I was like, okay, I can see now that I have a lot of waves, a lot of wind, a lot of insects, and a lot of flowers in my work. And they're all very ethereal and light colors and pastels. And then I've tried to create stuff outside. Like if you look at color harmony, there's like 7 different schemes. But I always stay in the monochromatic one or the complementary one because they're similar colors. I've tried to create a triad. I've tried to create with like different ones. And there was one that I did that actually won several awards. And it's a ballerina in a floral dress with a floral crown. And a dog is right next to her. And the dog is also wearing like flowers. And it was very colorful in person. And it was a stunning image. And I couldn't get myself to say this is mine because it was so out of the color scheme that I work with that I turned it into black and white. Oh. And that was like, okay, so now this is me because it's monochromatic. Mm-hmm. And when I submitted it like that, it actually won like awards in 3 different competitions. Wow. So just stay true to your style.
Yeah.
And sometimes you see other stuff and I can appreciate the beauty in what they create, the originality, but it doesn't mean that I have to do it that way. And a lot of times, again, back to imposter syndrome, who cares? It's what makes you happy. Don't think of like, oh, what if nobody likes it? What if whatever? It's art. At the end of the day, it's art, and you get to feel something, and then you'll make other people feel something about it, whether they like it or not.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that. I mean, what you said there, it can be transferred no matter what you're doing. It doesn't necessarily have to be in an artistic medium, but regardless of what you're doing, whether you're working in healthcare or you're teaching or whatever, there's a million examples of how people are doing it. And like you said, like you don't follow photographers, but you look more for inspiration and motivation and things that connect with what makes you happy and lights you up inside. And that's always something that, I look for too. Like I don't for Let Her Speak, I don't necessarily follow a ton of other women's organizations. And people ask me all the time, like, what other organizations do you connect with and talk to? And it's like, no, I'm actually following other women who would be the types of women that I feel would be a part of the community. And I look at what do they care about and what are they, because I'm more curious about learning about a woman than I am curious about seeing how another organization functions. So I feel like it's a very similar type of mindset.
It's very similar. And even with my coaching program, you know, I've only worked with one coach my entire time during in this industry, and she's always evolving. But even with that, I'm taking from what I know from real estate. You know, none of them has been in it, and that a lot of my clients are in it, and other industries and how they're coaching, you know, their clients. Because once you start in photography, then there's the same content, slightly different colors, that slightly different flavors, but it's the same thing. And I'm like, and the way that you stand out is by bringing something from outside. It's just like you said, you know, as if you're doing just what everybody else is doing, then what's the point?
Yep, exactly. That's the, you know, the technical term of your value proposition is you know, what makes you different, and what's the sizzle, you know, is the other thing. So, and I know you've brought up Sue like, a bunch of times, and I know we talked a little bit about her, I think the last time that we chatted. But I would love for you to talk a little bit about more about that relationship, considering she's been your mentor and your go-to person since the beginning. So how has that relationship evolved since you first started?
So the first time I heard of her was in 2013, and it was watching a live course out of Seattle. And then in 2015, I met her in person when she announced her first in-person workshop. We connected then, actually, and that's how I began to be a part of her coaching group. She took about 20 of us, of the people she had met, in 2 workshops in New York, 2 workshops in LA, and 2 workshops in Paris. And she called about 20 of those people and said, I connected with you in some way, and I'm launching my education platform, and I want you to be a part of it as live audience. And so that's how I started. And then in 2018, I assisted, because one of the things I learned doing, I don't learn just by watching things, or especially not listening. I'm the worst listener. I don't do podcasts. I'm sorry. I can't.
I personally don't listen to a lot of podcasts either, but I love talking to people.
Yes, I love that. But there's so many people that do. My husband learns by listening, right? That's how he learns things. My daughter does too. I don't. I read and I do. Those are the ways that I learn. And so I told her, I'm like, whenever you have a workshop, I said, I'll fly from Tennessee to wherever you're having it, and I will do whatever you want. I'll pick up the food, I'll clean it, I'll do whatever. I just want to be there so I can see it in person, so I know how to do it when I go home. And so that was the attitude for me. So I did like several. She did like maybe 4 events like that, and I was a part of it as a support member. And then when I started creating all the creative stuff, I started submitting also to awards and accreditation, so I can have a paper that says, okay, you're a photographer, legit, right? And so I did that. And once I did that, I realized that she realized, Saray, you're really talented. You need to continue submitting. And she had the Portrait Masters, which is where I have my master's, my fellow, or whatever it's called, with them. It's the highest tier. And so in 2019, Daniel quit his job so he can work with me. That's my husband. And so we went on a 20-day trip to Australia, you know, because he had left his job finally. And so, and I got to go to a conference there. I had 2 clients there, coaching clients. So it was business, but also play trip. And so I'm sitting there in my hotel, and she calls me, and she's like, Saray, because she doesn't judge the competition. She sponsors it, but she doesn't judge it. And she said, we just went through all of the things, and what I'm going to tell you, you know, it's confidential. You won one of the categories, the first place. But because you have been a supporter for a year with us, we don't want it to seem that you had preferential treatment, and that's why you won first place. even though I had nothing to it with judge. The people that judges, there's 11 judges from the world around the world. They don't know who you are. It's submitted anonymously anyways. It doesn't have a name. And so I said, okay. And she said, so we're going to name you as the nominal winner, but you're not going to get the prize. And I said, you know what? At the end of the day, that's okay. I don't care. It's fine. Mm-hmm. She calls me 5 minutes later laughing. She's like, forget everything I just told you and watch the awards tomorrow. And so it was like 3 a.m. time in Australia because it was done in LA. And so I watched and I got first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. I skipped seventh and then I got eighth, ninth, 10th. And then I think I had a total of 12 placements in the top 20 for that category.
Oh my gosh.
And they were like, you won it fair and square. So we're not going to take away the prize, but we're going to get you into our payroll officially as soon as this is done. Which also means that you can't win anymore from now on. I was like, that's okay. I won all of them now.
Right.
And so that started now the relationship, not just as a mentor, mentee, but then now I was part of her team. And I've been a supporter with her since 2019. And now, I take it. She has a group of about 10,000 people on Facebook that are paying members to her platform. And so I help manage that. I answer a lot of questions, not every day, but when I do, it's like an hour that I'm there just answering questions. Where do I find this? How do I learn that? If I need this thing, where do I go? And so because I watched all of the videos, I know where everything is. So I just direct people here and there. And so that's where we are. But now that she's even getting into 2 different types of businesses that are not photography related at all, she's bringing me along. And that's how I started with the coaching idea and the fact that she's given me the opportunity to grow as she grows. And that's what I want also of my team members. I have 2 associate photographers right now. The first one started as an assistant. She only knew how to do makeup, not hair. And so I was like, I have somebody that does hair and makeup, so I want you to assist instead. And so she assisted, but then she got good at hair too. So she graduated to hair and makeup artist. And then she had an interest in photography, so I showed her how to do it. And now she's one of my associate photographers. The other, she was a high school intern 2 years ago. Last year she started working with me as an intern when she was going to college. Her parents and her decided that college was not for her, and she started wanting to also learn how to do photography. So now she's doing that with me. So I want people to grow because the more I grow, the more they grow, and then we bring more people in. And just that's exactly what my mentor taught me. So find somebody that is going to celebrate you and it's going to guide you and it's going to push you to do more. Because for my first 4 years of business, I was not even doing creative work. I was only doing headshots and branding. And she brought me to her studio and she said, here is access to all of my wardrobe, to my stylist, to a client. Create something that is not a headshot. And I had to create like on the spot, and it was awesome. And then she says, well, go home and now you're going to do one of these a month. Right? And then she's like, you're going to come back in June and talk about headshots in my platform. And so I did. And then in May, I had not done it. And that was in January of 2017. And so in May comes and I'm like, I haven't done anything every month. And so I went and pushed myself and I got some dancers and I created some of my best work to date. And then, and then from there, I just started doing more and more and more. So you want to find somebody that sees the potential in you and somebody that pushes you out of your comfort zone and somebody that as they grow, they also want to see you grow.
Has there been, because I'm assuming that she has shared, enough knowledge to fill several books for you, but has there been anything, maybe it was early on or maybe it was recently, that was created an aha moment for you?
Well, one of the things that we did lately, she said, because I told her, I'm like, when I had launched the coaching program and I was so proud and I was so excited and I was and I was trying to describe to her, I was like, I can't believe that this is happening. And I said, and I'm so thankful to you because you saw this in me and you encouraged me to go forth and do it. And And I said, and I don't even know what to say. This is so exciting. I don't have the words. And she's like, it's euphoric. And I was like, yes, it is. It is. That's the perfect word to describe it. And then she said, you are finally now walking in the purpose that you were created to walk on. You're now doing this, with so much certainty and so much direction that it's clear. The path is finally clear. And that's what I told her. I'm like, before, I've enjoyed all the things that I've done, but I've never been in a place where I know what I'm doing and I'm loving it. And it's so clear to see where I'm going and where it's headed. And she said, you're walking now in the place that you were supposed to walk. And so I feel, to me, that has been such great validation to have somebody share that with me. She's like, that's how I felt, she said, when I started this path of being an educator in the industry. And I don't know. I think everything that I've learned from her, it's like during sales, say the price and shut up. Like, don't talk more. And if they want it, they're going to buy it, and then, there's always you'll find the same things. It's the same view, just different altitude. Mm-hmm. So you'll always come back to those same problems, but now you are higher, so you can see them from a different perspective and solve them faster or more efficiently. And then the fact, it's just to follow your heart, follow your intuition. It's so important. A lot of times we think we have to please somebody or we have to fit in a box, and we don't. We just need to be ourselves, true to who we are. And sometimes the hardest part is finding who that person is.
Yeah, exactly. That's always the hard part. And I can only imagine from her perspective, the joy that comes when you see someone with potential and the moment that they see that same potential in themselves, and everything that you've seen and you've observed, that there's no way you could convince them to see it. They have to start seeing it. And the moment that happens and that clicks, it's just the most fantastic
It's amazing
thing. Yeah.
As a teacher, it's the best thing. I've always wanted my kids to get to the point where they're like, oh, I get it. And it was funny because sometimes it was like Cinco de Mayo is right around the corner, mm-hmm. right? And then we will learn about the months of the year and the day and the numbers. And then we're like, oh, Miss Taylor-Roman, did you know that Cinco de Mayo means May 5th? And I was like, yes. Yeah. But it's just getting them, and they were like, like it was like crazy, like an amazing discovery for them. But that's where I want everybody to be, and I feel as a coach, as a mentor, as a teacher, you want the people that are working with you to get to that point where they have those aha moments, where they realize their own potential, and they're like, you know what, I can do this. I can do this.
Yeah. Then you get to go like, I know, but I'm so glad you figured that out now. Yes. That's great.
Yay. Let's take off now the, what is it called? The training wheels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the training wheels can
you
come
don't need them anymore.
Yeah. I always do you get your sparkle sticker, your gold star, because you figured that out. That's awesome. Yeah. So I'm sure that there's several people listening that are convinced that they want to work with you, which I cannot blame them. So can you talk a little bit about what your coaching is and kind of what your plans are and how people can connect with you if they're interested in working with you?
Yeah, thank you. So my new brand is called Take Action with Saray. It's all about taking action. Right now I'm working just with photographers, but I feel that that's the steps tool for the next part, where it will be just creative entrepreneurs. And so there's no website. So I'm working on that right now. I have one page, but you have to call me, reach out to me first for me to send that if you're a photographer. And so you can email me at saray@taylorroman.com if you want that information, or you can follow me on Instagram at Take Action with Saray. And so that's one way to reach out. Right now, what I'm working on is I have my first pilot program as a group going on right now. I'm right in the middle of it. And I just did my first in person at my studio with one person and with 4 people that came from around the country. And we have planned the next one with double the amount, 8 people for July. So everything that we're creating right now is just content, and we're organizing all of it. I'm working with a couple of people here locally so they can, make it all pretty, a booklet or whatever it is. So next year it's going to be ready. But if you want to connect now and be part of the beta or the pilot programs, which are a little bit more affordable than they may be in a year from now, then, reach out and then we can see what will work for you and if we're a good fit or not.
Okay. That's great. That's great. And for people who have been hearing us talking about your beautiful photographs, where can they view and see some of your beautiful creative designs?
So my portrait photography page is Taylor-Roman.com. That's my last name. There's no hyphen. And if you want to find me on Instagram, it's Taylor-Roman Portraits. And that's for my creative work. For my headshot work, it's Not Your Office Headshot on Instagram.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much, Saray, for taking the time, sharing your story. I hope that we've done a job of commemorating this entire journey and, giving you space to look back and look forward. And I am so excited to see where you go from here.
I appreciate it so much, Catherine. Thank you so much for having me then and now. And I'm just excited that I get to share with somebody like you who's so inspiring, who's so present in our community, and who does so much, to help all these entrepreneurs also realize that potential that they have. So that's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. This episode of She Speaks is brought to you by our amazing partners at First Horizon Bank. She Speaks is produced, edited, and scored by the very talented Travis Tench at Oak Hill Audio. If you loved the episode you just heard and want to support Let Her Speak's mission of elevating real women's stories, don't forget to follow, subscribe, and share at Let Her Speak USA. Together, we will make our voices heard.